everybody, this is Ben. After a couple of recent recipes on the Kissing the Cook website mentioned blind baking a pastry crust, a number of people asked me about the right way to do that. So I made this video showing a couple of different ways to blind bake a pastry crust. First, what is blind baking? Well, very simply, blind baking is pre-baking the pastry crust, baking it either completely through or partway through, depending on what you're making, but baking it before you put the filling in. It sounds simple, it is simple, but like anything else, there are right ways and wrong ways to do it. And the purpose of this video is to show you a couple of those right ways. We're going to do this by making a very tasty, very simple lemon pudding pie. The filling is a pudding that we're going to make from a mix, which I want to say right away is not normally the way we do things on Kissing the Cook, but the real purpose of this video is to demonstrate for you how to handle and blind bake a pastry crust, and I didn't want to distract from that by getting into a lot of details about making a particular pie filling. We can always do pie fillings in another video, you never know. Besides, even though it's from a mix, you'll see we're still going to do a couple of things to dress it up, make it very nice, look nice, taste nice, and certainly like everything we do on Kissing the Cook, to make it reduced fat. I promise you we're going to make sure that that filling looks and tastes like it belongs in that beautifully baked and formed pie crust that you're going to make. Now, something else you'll see is that for this video I've rolled out a delicious reduced fat pie crust. Yes, I did say reduced fat pie crust. That's not something you hear said normally. It's a pie crust that you can make yourself very easily using one of my very favorite recipes. It's called Impossible Pie Crust. It is on the website at the bottom of the screen. You'll see it there. It's called Impossible Pie Crust. It's in the archive. You'll find it waiting for you at the website. If you take a look when we're done here, you'll be glad you did, I think. All right, enough talk. Let's get started. As you can see, I've started by rolling out the dough for the crust. It just needs to be rolled out large enough so that it covers the pan and still leaves a little hanging over the edge of the pan. Having enough dough to hang over the edge is going to be important once we get the dough into the pan, because when we bake it, the dough is going to shrink a little bit. Now, with the dough all rolled out, we'll need to get it into the pan without tearing it, and you can do this a couple of different ways. One way that a lot of people like is simply to very gently fold the dough in half and then in half again, the way you see here, and then laying it gently in the pan and unfold it, adjusting it as necessary to get it to cover the pan as evenly as you can. Another way to do this is to roll the dough gently onto a rolling pin and lay it onto the pan. Either of these ways works very well, although being able to roll the dough up onto the pin is also very helpful when you're rolling out the dough in the first place and you need to get a little more flour underneath it to keep it from sticking to the counter. Now, once the dough is on the pan, we need to really fit it into the pan so that there are no air pockets underneath. Now, when I do this, I want you to notice not only what I'm doing, but also what I'm not doing. What I'm doing is lifting the dough gently and fitting it into the bottom edge of the pan. What I'm not doing is pushing down on the dough to stretch it into the edge. You don't want to stretch the dough. Flour contains a protein called gluten that gets tough and elasticy when you overwork it. That's why when you use pastry flour, you're using a flour that has less gluten than all-purpose flour. That's also why pie dough recipes usually have some kind of acid in them, either lemon juice or sometimes people use vinegar. The acid keeps the gluten from getting too tough. Next, of course, we're going to want to trim around the edges. And again, we want to use shears to cut off the excess dough. You don't want to just pull at it for the same reason. You don't want the gluten to toughen up on us. And as I mentioned earlier, you want to leave about 1/4 of an inch, or for my overseas friends, about 1/2 centimeter of extra dough hanging past the edge of the pan. Now we'll want to do something with the edge of the crust to make it look nice. Making different kinds of edges on a pie crust is something you can do a whole video about, or several. We're just going to do a simple edge by pressing the tines of our fork around the edges. You can make the impressions right next to each other or space them out. It's just a question of what you like. I'm just going to put them right next to each other. What I'm doing here is for a single crust pie. If you're doing a double crust pie, where you put another crust on top after you've put it in the filling, you would just do this business with the fork on the top crust instead of on the bottom crust. Now we'll need to blind bake the pie crust. There are a couple of different ways you can go about this. The first way is the rice method, or the bean method, or the rice and bean method. What it's called just depends on what you're using. To do this, you'll need a piece of parchment cut so that it can go inside your pie crust. You want to get a square piece, and do what I'm doing here, fold it into quarters. When you do that, you'll just need to make sure that you remember where the center is. Okay, when you fold it, there you go, just make sure you want to remember right there where the center is. Once you've got that, fold the sides in, one at a time, just fold the sides in to make a kind of a triangle. First one, then the other. It's almost going to look like a coffee filter. Once it's folded, you just use your shears to trim it. And you'll see this is going to give you, when you unfold it, let's say, when you unfold it, it's going to give you a nice sort of round piece of parchment that will lay very nicely on top of your cooked pie crust in the pan. Okay, and then, while the phone is ringing, again, working very gently so you don't damage the crust, you want to very gently lay the parchment on top of the crust to kind of line it. You'll see in a moment why we do that. Now you'll sometimes, by the way, hear people say to do this with foil instead of parchment. Please don't do that. The dough won't bake the same. What we want to do with this, I'm filling this with a mixture of rice and beans. This is where some people use rice, some people use beans, some people use rice and beans like I'm doing here. You're not going to be eating this. This is just kind of a fake temporary filling to be used while you're blind baking the crust. After you're done with this, you would actually put the rice and beans back into the sealed container and put them back in your pantry for the next time. People who use this method have their beans or their rice and beans, whatever they use, they can have them for years, literally for years. Just smooth it out, and there it is, all ready to be blind baked. Now, the other way to do this, and frankly the one I prefer to use because I think it's just simpler, is the fork method. You're just using a fork to perforate the crust. You'll need to do this on the bottom, the sides, and on the bottom edge. Now when you do this, there's no need to worry about the filling that you're going to put in later leaking out through the holes. The holes will seal up once the crust is blind baked. And if you're still worried that it'll leak, just hit it with an egg wash before you add the filling. To do that, you just take one egg, beat it very well, mix in 1 tablespoon of water, and then just brush it all over the crust. That's up to you. And there's a close-up to maybe give you a better look at the perforations. Next, you want to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 175 degrees centigrade. And you want to bake the crust for as long as it takes to get it to the texture you want. Now in this case, I want it fully baked, and so I did it for about 25 minutes, but check it often. Every oven is different, and every pie you're baking is a little different. Also, if when you're doing this, the edge starts to get a little too brown, just cover the edge either with an edge shield, which is something you can buy at a kitchen supply store, or you can also just take some foil and wrap it around the edge. It doesn't matter. Once the crust is blind baked, now we get to fill it with our cooked pudding. This is just a pudding mix cooked mostly by the directions on the package, with a couple of differences. Instead of 2 egg yolks, which the directions called for, I used 1 egg substitute egg. And in place of the regular sugar, I used vanilla sugar, which is always something that makes things a little bit special. Get it all in there, we waste nothing. Now, after we pour in the filling, the next thing we're going to do is top it with a mix of toasted coconut and toasted pecans. I toast them to bring out the flavor a little bit more. This is going to give it a sweetness and a crunch that will contrast very nicely with the tart softness of the lemon filling. Just get some nice coverage there. And after you're done with this, all you need to do is refrigerate it for a couple of hours until the filling is cold and nice and firm, and then you've got yourself a simple, delicious treat. I certainly hope you saw an easy blind bake method for doing your pies, quiches, or anything else of that nature. Certainly hope, too, that you'll stop by the website where there are more recipes, including impossible pie crust, that reduced fat pie crust. Again, you'll find it in the archive on the website that you see on the bottom of the screen. My name is Ben. Till next time, stay well, keep it about the food, and always remember to kiss the cook.